In order to get to today's topic of discussion, we need to revisit an old clip of mine. The music alone ought to be a dead giveaway, but here we go. This is the infamous Mitko Vasilev drag race from Need for Speed Payback. And to be fair, I did milk it a little bit in post-production. Though, when I mentioned at the end of that series that I did not lose a single on-road race at any time during that playthrough, obviously there was reasoning that an event such as this one does not count. Because when it gets down to it, drag races in racing games are just glorified quick-time events. There is no real technique involved with them, there is no best line, no optimal tuning, and no real player input other than hold down the right trigger and press the corresponding button at the right time to shift your car. In Payback, it was the Y button, which was a strange choice. In Motorfest, it's the right shoulder button, and to give myself a bit of an edge, I now have a controller with custom paddle buttons just to make it a bit more comfortable. Whether this controller gives me any kind of technical benefit beyond comfort is up for debate, because honestly, QuickTime events are total luck. Given it is literally millisecond level timing, everything from frame rate variability to controller input lag will affect how well you do at QTEs. And this goes for every game which decides to use them. Thankfully, outside of drag races, racing games tend to shy away from them, and for good reason. They suck. There is, of course, one racing game that did use them extensively in cutscenes, and that was Need for Speed The Run. I have never played The Run, but I have seen others play it, and to put it simply, whomever had the absolute sociopathy to argue that a racing game would somehow be made better by getting out of the car and running around on foot to pre-recorded cinematics which scream at you to push random buttons at random times, those people need to be locked away in a rubber room and never allowed to escape. Those people are a menace to society on the same level of bastardization as extended warranty salespeople or AI-based tech support lines. Yeah, folks, did you know my local ISP is now using AI text-to-speech for IT service calls during evening hours? I say this as someone who both supports AI advancement and also literally cloned my voice with AI for TTS purposes, but I also feel very strongly that when I call tech support at 2 in the morning because my network has gone down, I want a damn human to troubleshoot my network and not an automated system telling me, oh, just wait 15 minutes to see if it will come back online. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, QuickTime events. Aside from the two aforementioned examples, they thankfully do not occur too much in racing games, as far as I've seen over the past 20 or so years. That said, when you look at other genres, oh boy howdy, they are not only prevalent, but they have this incredible power to take an otherwise enjoyable game and make it very unfun very quickly. So let's talk about a few examples that I have encountered over the past few weeks. I talked recently about playing Yakuza Like a Dragon. It is a turn-based JRPG, so every turn you command your characters to perform attacks. Regular attacks essentially play out on their own, but special attacks in this game have QTE elements to them. You can either mash the X button or press the Y button at a specific time as outlined on screen, and your attack will do more damage. Not only that, but when you are attacked, you can press B at the right time to insta-guard and take less damage. It is an attempt to add player input into an otherwise menu-oriented fight. Are you penalized for not doing it? I'll say in the early fights, no, but in later fights, it becomes almost mandatory because enemy attacks get to a point where they can all but one-shot you if you don't counter them. And you also want to do as much damage as quickly as possible so these fights don't drag on longer than they have to. I would consider it a minor offense, certainly not the worst decision made by developers of that game, but a more in-depth look of that game's pros and cons is better left to another video. Let's take another example. Mafia Definitive Edition was recently added to Game Pass at the time of this video, so I checked it out. The game is well known as being not only a cover shooter, but also a car-centric action game. When you do some of these car sections, the game will prompt you to drive through sections that have complex obstacles and hazards. You'll have to react with split-second timing to avoid these hazards and trick your assailants into crashing into those very same hazards. It doesn't occur too often, though when it did happen, it definitely felt like it was taking choice away from me as the player. Given I play racing games primarily, there are times where I wish I could have chosen different courses of action than what the game allowed. And if that were the only problem I had, then I wouldn't have had much to complain about in that game. The greater problem with Mafia, in my opinion anyway, is when that cover shooter turned into a brawler instead. There are points in Mafia where you are not able to use your firearms and instead rely on hand-to-hand combat. And the way it works in Mafia is very similar to how it works in, say, Hitman. Your enemy throws a punch, you are given a QTE to counter that punch, usually X or Y, and then you have a second QTE to throw your own punch, usually the B button. If your punch connects, you then mash the same button repeatedly until the enemy gives up or is knocked unconscious. The margin of error for these counterattacks is very, very tight, and each time they happen, the game slows down time and limits your other movements in order to emphasize, hey, you are about to get laid the frick out if you don't press this button at point now. And to me, that completely takes the player out of the action. It's like the game is trying to be more of a movie that you watch and are only allowed to play when the developer tells you that you are allowed to play it. But hey, I got through it. I beat that game, just like I did with Like a Dragon. Didn't know if I would play their sequels or not, given I'd be doing just more of the same, and I don't know if I would call that fun. But these two games, for what they were not nearly as awful, and I mean that quite viscerally, as the next game I sat down and played, ultimately one that I wish that I had never started. I am talking about Tomb Raider Definitive Edition. This game, this freaking nightmare of a game that was so up its own ass from the very moment you hit New Game, took every case example of QTEs talked about for the last 10 or so minutes, combined them, and made them all 100 times worse. This game will go on my list as one of the worst video games of all time. Full stop. Nearly every cutscene in Tomb Raider has QuickTime events, and every time you will have approximately 1 second to respond to them. Whether it's mashing X to avoid slipping off a ledge, shaking the analog stick left and right repeatedly to wriggle out of an attacker's grasp, hitting Y at the exact moment to perform a scripted throw, which the game never fully explains what the right moment actually is, mind you, or even something as radically insane as pulling out your shotgun while being swept down a raging river and hitting the trigger button at the right time to blow up a barrier that just so happened to be in your way. You cannot make this shit up, people. It is constant and non-stop. You'll find yourself having to do timed B presses to drop between zip lines, B presses into Y presses for any combat-related dodge counter, even timed X presses to move between rock walls with your pickaxe. This game wouldn't even give up QuickTime events during the final boss. Not to spoil it or anything, but if you do get that far in the game, the final event of that final boss fight is you getting a second pistol and mashing the left and right triggers to dual wield shoot the boss until they fall off the ledge and die. and then the final cutscene and credits roll. Gamers, do you actually find this fun? Do you find being told what to press and when, relying solely on reflex rather than strategy, to be the making of a fun, challenging, and memorable gaming experience? Because I sure as hell don't. Because really, anyone with the IQ equivalent to a lab mouse can do this. And it is this level of disrespect for the player that turns me away from a lot of other games. Like, Sonic Frontiers has been on my list for a while, but I will likely not play it anytime soon because I still haven't gotten over the bullshit of Sonic Unleashed, where the final boss fight in the game has you win by pressing X 60 times in a row. It literally counts them for you. I want to be a gamer. I grew up with games. I love the medium and the stories it tries to tell. But I refuse to waste my time slogging through a story that doesn't want me, as the player, to explore it. Like, the reason I don't criticize Hitman for having the same brawler QTEs as Mafia does is because if you are ever put in a situation that results in hand-to-hand combat, you have already failed as a player. And the game expects you to know that quite well as a stealth game. QTEs are your punishment in that game. Otherwise, they don't exist. And that is how it ought to be. Alright, that is enough of my ranting for one day, so it's status update time. Work continues on NFS Rivals, and I'm honestly almost done with the production side of it. I finished episode 20 prior to making this video, and I have about 3 more episodes to work on, assuming I don't add any more to that list, but you never know with me. I will have a few weeks left over in December to do whatever short series I want to do, though I haven't decided what that's going to be yet. I would love to do Firewatch because it's a chill game, and I've said for the last 3 years, I think, that I want to play it. But I could also do something like 80s Overdrive, or Ridge Racer 6, or even a Motorfest special, since there were some playlists I have not talked about, and those honestly deserve a production made for them. Let me know what y'all think. As always, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video.